we're doing both. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. All right, so go ahead and take your notes out. We are going to be getting 2 notes. After we finish the video from the Mao years, we've got like, 10 or 15 minutes left on that. So we'll go ahead and finish that out, and then we'll get into the notes. And this is in your handout, Cold War and the Americas. So it's on page 1. We'll be talking about Kennedy's Alliance for Progress, Nixon's covert operations, and then eventually we'll get to Canada, Mexico, Brazil. I don't know if we'll get to them necessarily today, but that's going to lead us to the end of this unit. Yeah, Cold War Part 2 of 3. And what do we get when we finish a unit? Yes, we got a unit test. And look, I got it up on the board. I'm tentatively putting that for Wednesday, the 6th. So make note, everybody. Because it's like, this is the seniors. Some of you are here every day, because then that was the understanding, unless you're at home every day. But some people are here on their blue day, and some people are here on their green day. So if you are not here, then you just have to basically chime in and watch my video that I post every day on my YouTube channel. Or you can Zoom in. Welcome, Landon. Okay, and we've had you Zoom in before. I don't know if we've had anybody else among the seniors Zoom in. I don't think so. No, that's what I said. You did. All right. Okay. Yep. So here's the deal. This is going to be very important because you guys are here, and so you'll have the test. And it is a 75-point test, matching true, false, and so forth, covering this unit. And so I really do want you here on the 6th. And I was in conversations that lead to, I guess, your biology test. Those of you guys doing biology, that's going to be on the 7th. So we do want to have it on the same day. So I'm just like, I'm going to get this as fresh as we can possibly to you, wrapping this up, not the first day back, but we'll have a review then on the 5th. Okay, so I'm anticipating we get this. If for some reason it happens, it goes on a little bit longer, then we'll bump it up, and it won't be till the 7th. It'll be on like the 8th. Okay, and then what are we going to start after that? Boom, Cold War Part 3 of 3. After that, genocide, okay, in Rwanda and the Balkan states. All right? Oh, and is there anything else that's going to be very important to do by the end of this week? Yeah, the IA. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, make sure you bring it in. If you are physically here on the Friday of this week, physically bring it in. If you're physically not here on the Friday and you haven't turned it in Thursday, physically get yourself here, print it out, bring it to me. When's it due? Thank you. Friday. Looking forward to reading it over my break. And I'm looking forward to you not having to deal with it again, beginning with the break. Yeah, ever. And then, yeah, I mean, you guys still have other things you have to do in your other classes, which is fine. But you've got this and that and so forth. Okay? Also, just FYI, yesterday, there was a presidential election. Did you know that? Yes, there was a presidential election. You guys are like, oh, I thought it was on November the 3rd. Well, it was. We have multi-parts in our presidential election constitutional sequence. All right? On that day, back in November, voters voted for electors who were pledged to support one candidate or the other. And as a result of those elections in November, the electors that were chosen cast their votes yesterday. Four Idaho electors gathered, I think, at the State House, and then they cast their votes for Trump, who was the winner in Idaho. Okay, 55 of them gathered somewhere. I don't know. They may be done at Zoom-like for, like, California. In some of the states that were very close, where there were lawsuits that were brought, that the courts looked at allegations and concerns about fraud and so forth, the courts have pretty much, as far as I can tell, wrapped up all of their proceedings. So all of the states, prior to yesterday, had certified the final results of those states' elections. Okay? So, there you go. In fact, there was one, I think Texas brought a lawsuit basically saying, hey, there's a bunch of other states that we want to have overturned because we don't like the results of that. That appeal went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and a unanimous decision basically said, no. So it's up to the states to decide how they're going to be doing their process, and they sorted that all out. So we can say, as a result of the electoral vote, Joe Biden is the president-elect, and Kamala Harris is the vice president-elect. Now, those electoral votes will be sent to Congress, and they'll open up their present in January and go, ha, something that they already know, which is the result of the electoral vote. When's the actual inauguration? January 20th. Yeah, January 20th, Washington, D.C. It'll be a little, obviously, because of COVID, it's going to be a little bit different. You're not going to have as, like, the big crowds and so forth there. I'll be curious to see how it plays out. But there's going to be certain people who will be there, and there'll be, I imagine there'll be masks and social distancing and so forth. It is going to be interesting because it sounds like I'll be watching to see who is in attendance. Last time we had a president who was running for re-election who was defeated. George H.W. Bush was defeated by Bill Clinton, and that was the 1992 presidential election. George H.W. Bush was there to be the outgoing president as the new president was sworn in. There's some speculation, perhaps, that President Trump will not be in attendance at the inauguration, but we'll see. Maybe he'll be somewhere else. But that would break a tradition that's been going on for a pretty long time as far as new presidents coming in and the outgoing president actually being there present for the inauguration. So anyway, good job on your predictions. I've already got those plugged into Google Classroom. I encourage you guys to do the research, make predictions. And most of you guys did really, really well on that. Do you want to know who did best? There was one. It was not a senior. There was one senior who got one wrong. They actually got, the Nebraska one's tricky. Nebraska's 2nd congressional district went to Biden. The rest of the state went to Trump. Maine's 2nd congressional district went to Trump. The rest of the state went to Biden. That was a hard prediction, and those were like pretty close. Here's one. They got the Nebraska. They got the everything. The only one they didn't get was Georgia. Congratulations, Jack. Yeah, but a lot of the seniors did really, really well on this if you got those turned in. I mean, I don't think I would have done as well. I would have probably been like in the mix of it, because there was a lot of close ones. There was a junior. They got every single one of them right. And she's attending today. So if you see Cadence Smith, tell her, hoorah, one person. Yeah, the next closest was Jack. And then after that, mostly the best was like 3 or 4 wrong. I think some of you guys got like pretty close on that one. So anyway, questions on that? Yep. All right. Let's go to, we were in the, looking at China and how kind of crazy it is during the time of the Cultural Revolution, and how Mao Zedong, I don't know. If he changes his mind, is that a dangerous thing? For who? The people who agreed with him yesterday, who no longer agree with him? Who was the man who was most associated with the Cultural Revolution and put together Lin Biao? Yeah? They all agreed that the United States is dangerous and the Soviet Union is dangerous, right? Well, who changed their mind and said, well, maybe one of those is more dangerous? Which one did he say was more dangerous? Soviet Union, right? Because there was actually border conflict. There was fighting along the border. It's weird, okay? And so Mao is kind of in favor of opening up relations to the United States of America. And so they would. Was Nixon open to improving relations with China? Communist China? Absolutely, because Nixon's always looking for some opportunity to drive a wedge between China and the Soviet Union, and there was an opportunity to drive that wedge at that time. So Mao bounces back a bit health-wise, 1972, and hosts Richard Nixon, and relations improve quite a bit over a period of time. It's any question as to how relations between the United States and China are going to be in your lifetime. How would you say right now? Relations with the United States and China improving? Going down a bit. I think they're probably going down a bit because of things like, I don't know, spying, Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, a whole bunch of people put into confinement. Stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and the corona. Oh, that's right. She says with a mask over her face, coronavirus. Hey, don't blame everything on. Well, they could have done a lot more, I think it's fair to say, to have stopped some of that. So what we're going to look at now for the remainder of this particular video is the last of the Mao years, when he's on the decline, and who's going to take his place, and some of the things that come out of that. By the way, Ashton, who is going to take his place, ultimately? Deng Xiaoping. Tell me about Deng. He's hated by Jiang Sheng, right? Okay. Are you a white cat or a black cat? Or does it matter? And so what is he talking about? What is ultimately Deng Xiaoping going to say? You know what? It's time that we introduce it. We won't call it by that name because that goes against communism. But what is he going to introduce that's going to help the Chinese economy out during his tenure as the leader of China? Well, actually, yeah. I mean, we'll call it capitalism. Do you guys remember the name that he calls it? He calls it socialism with Chinese characteristics, i.e., capitalism. But he also makes sure that, unlike the Soviets, he's very careful, cross the river by feeling the stones. He's very careful to transition from government-controlled economy to capitalism. Because if you close down a defunct, inefficient, government-controlled factory, what are you going to get? A bunch of unemployed people. So what do you need to make sure that you have if you're going to have a bunch of unemployed people? You're going to have to transition them into jobs or some kind of like support system. I mean, because everyone knows that. You don't want to have a whole bunch of unemployed people, right? Do we want to have a whole bunch of unemployed people today in the United States of America? Nope. Has the United States Republicans and Democrats agreed that there should be money to help support those people during the difficulties of the coronavirus and the quarantines? Yep. Yep. Okay. So, anyway, so let's finish out the remainder of the film, and then we're going to turn our attention to Latin America. All right.
We expected and frequently received diatribes for public consumption, both in the press and in the diplomacy itself. The careful issue was not to be carried away by this and overly offended by it, as we attempted to achieve a greater outcome.
The outcome was an historic agreement called the Shanghai Communique. Issues like America's role in Vietnam and U.S. relations with China
Dropped some of the components of the history exam. So it takes some of the pressure off. Yeah. Well, it gives everyone a fighting chance.
Gradually, China would become an active player in world politics. As the country began to emerge from the worst terror of the Cultural Revolution, Mao turned his attention to China's presence. Small rural factories were set up to make farm tools and process local crops. Thousands of paramedics or barefoot doctors brought free, basic health care to remote villages. Working with Zhou Enlai, Mao began to rehabilitate party members.
Remember that? Now, what does
Many, like Deng Xiaoping, returned to their...
what does Deng Xiaoping really think of Jiang Sheng? Hates her, and vice versa.
By 1974, Mao appeared in public only to receive foreign dignitaries.
Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos from the
When his
Philippines.
eyesight deteriorated, he requested someone to read Chinese literature to him.
I was hurried into the room where I saw Chairman Mao Zedong. He was sitting on a sofa. I was shocked. I had expected him to be in growing health, our red sun. But the Chairman Mao I saw was pale and haggard. And he had become very thin. I thought, I have so many things to tell you. I've dreamed about you and hoped to pour out all my suffering to you. How could you be like this? So I cried. I must have looked ridiculous. This old man in front of me. The grandeur and brilliance of the Mao I had imagined totally disappeared.
The question of who would succeed Mao dominated Beijing politics. Mao, now 81 years old, played one faction off against the other. Jiang Qing's group, later reviled as the Gang of Four, wanted to continue the Cultural Revolution. They viewed Zhou Enlai as their main rival, and they orchestrated a campaign against him.
Yep, we gave you that notes. Remember that?
It really shook me. I didn't expect such a situation in the party. I had great respect and reverence for Mao Zedong. I respected him greatly. As for Zhou Enlai, I loved him very much. Like many people, I loved him very much. But now I realized that the two leaders had very different opinions.
Really?
I thought, oh Lord, whom should I follow? I, a party member.
Would Zhou Enlai oppose him publicly?
Although Zhou suffered from
No.
the campaign, he kept his position. Many believed Mao saved him to run the country. By 1974, however, Zhou was ill with cancer. When he made a rare appearance at a dinner, the guests were overjoyed at his apparent recovery. But Zhou's health was fast deteriorating.
No more Joe.
Zhou Enlai died on January 8, 1976. Mao was too ill to attend the funeral. That spring, at the annual festival honoring the dead, thousands of people went to Tiananmen Square. They laid wreaths, flowers, and poems in honor of Zhou.
Is that okay? They're just honoring Zhou Enlai.
They turned into a demonstration against the Gang of Four.
Oh.
And directly against Mao himself.
Oh. Is that okay to have a demonstration against Mao?
But there in Tiananmen Square, I could be free. Everyone felt the same. At last, I found freedom there.
During the night, police removed the tributes. The next day, 100,000 people returned.
Whoa.
The crowd was ordered to leave. Many refused.
It never occurred to me they would use lethal force. It seems that communists would never do that because Mao had said those who put down a mass movement come to no good.
Has Mao ever put down a mass movement? Let's put down some of the ones he created.
About 11 that night, Jiang Qing came. She hurried into Mao's room. After she came out, I heard her say, "We've won. We've won. Chairman Mao has agreed that it is a counter-revolutionary riot. We should celebrate."
That night, militia were sent to Tiananmen Square to put down the demonstrations. The number of casualties and arrests is not known. In July, the worst earthquake in history devastated the city of Tangshan. At least 400,000 people were injured or killed. According to Chinese superstition, a disaster of this magnitude portends a change of dynasty. It came 2 months later on September 9th, 1976.
I went over to Mao's bed. He saw me and said, "Dr. Li, do you think there's any hope for me?" I knew very well that there was no hope at all. But I couldn't say that to him. I said, "There's hope. We're still trying." He looked very bad when I spoke. After, it seemed his face got a little color.
And then?
I felt his pulse, which seemed a little better too. Suddenly, I felt that there was no more strength in his hand. His hand dropped. I saw his eyes were closed. Then I looked at the electrocardiogram. The waves had become a straight line.
So he's a doctor. What does that mean?
In other words, his heart had stopped.
So, in other words, Mao is dead.
All was finished.
Still there. When I was with students in 2000, we went past that site.
We bought it once. We could hold up.
They keep it preserved, yeah. It's shrinking a little bit, though, over time.
Plus, the way China was such a big thing. We could hold it up after now.
Hmm?
What will happen?
Yeah. So everything was covered when I saw it by a flag, except for his face. So that was the thing that they tried to keep preserved most, was the face.
So
But
many
apparently,
absurd
it's
things
things are starting
happen.
to sort of,
Everyone is struggling in a world full of absurdity.
you know.
That was something perhaps we could not understand.
But in this country, we don't preserve people for like decades and decades and decades.
Mao showed us a very rare case in which cruelty, selfishness, hypocrisy, and shamelessness were all found in the same person. Although he always tried to cover his actions with the most beautiful words, I don't think he ever had any moral principles.
Wow, that's harsh.
Never, ever will I forgive Mao for the crimes he committed against the Chinese nation.
Well, he didn't really feel anything special. Or feel sad. But I still think he was a great leader that the Chinese people should feel proud of. And that the Chinese Revolution should feel proud of.
Communist anthem.
China's new leader, the unknown
Huang Guofeng be in power very long? No.
If you showed any sign of joy, people would think you were gloating. You did not show deep grief either, because you would be suspected if you did. You put on expressionless faces like pieces of wood. We knew an era, the era of Mao Zedong, was gone, but we didn't know what was ahead of us.
And China continues on. It's a big deal. And you can give credit to Deng Xiaoping for introducing the socialism with Chinese characteristics, because that has helped China become a very successful economic world power. No, there's going to be a series of leaders, almost sort of like rule by committee. You'll have an individual leader, but nobody that is as preeminent as Mao or even as much as Deng, although the current one, Xi Jinping, has desire to move up and be seen as an individual with preeminent power and not so bound to the top Chinese ranking members of the Communist Party. What's that? Yes. Well, you'll just have to look it up yourself. Yes. Yep. Pooh Bear. Yes, I know, because his critics refer to him as Pooh, because he looks like Winnie the Pooh. Well, he doesn't want to be seen as looking like Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, and the Hong Kong people call him, yes, they call him Pooh. It's not very nice. But then, you know what? There's a lot of things aren't very nice in the world. Let's shift, shall we? Any questions on China? Okay, let's shift gears here. In your handout now, on page 1, we're doubling back, and we've saved the Americas for last, right? We've looked at lots of different parts of the world, and we saved the Americas for last, so we're going to do the Cold War in the Americas. And then actually, before we wrap up this unit, we'll get into the first part of episode number 18, Backyard, looking at U.S. policy in Latin America, something that we have done continually as we've gone through this course. What is the United States' relationship to Latin America? Well, and it varies, you know. You're like, not so good. You have to be very, very specific and so forth, right? I mean, I suppose, McKinley, what would be one country during this time period that we're looking at where the United States doesn't have really good relations with the Latin American government? Cuba, of course. Very good. What would be some of the ones that we actually get along with pretty well with at least their government? Yeah, we'll see that. Yeah, we're going to see. If their government, and put this down, during the Cold War, we've seen this before. We've seen it in Africa. We've seen it in Asia. We tend to support governments, even if they're not fully democratic, if they're on our side. If they're not on our side, we get nervous, especially if they're close to us physically. Cuba, we got really nervous about them, especially when they started putting in Soviet forward-based nuclear weapons. And we did something about that. Okay? So one of the things that's going to be kind of ongoing here is efforts to improve relations. And John F. Kennedy, in fact, is going to have a program, write it down, the Alliance for Progress. In 1961, in Kennedy's first year, he institutes a program called the Alliance for Progress. This is going to be an economic cooperation plan between the United States and Latin America. So Kennedy's basically trying to get the message to Latin America, hey, we want to be your friend. We don't want to boss you around, because things are looking a little bossy because of the Cold War, because we're getting a little bit nervous about, like, are these countries lining up with the Soviets and so forth. And it's kind of like one of those things. I don't know, Jackson, does it help the United States to actually give economic aid to other countries?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Are we looking to, like, buy friends or something in the world? Can we do that? Sure. Yeah, I mean, we do it all kinds of various different places, although there's a lot of countries in the world. Sometimes, like, we'll say, Tara, did we give money to Israel? Did we give money to Egypt? Did we? Tara, I'm asking Tara. Did we give, so we did give money to Egypt. What did we ask Egypt to do as kind of like almost conditional of like, we'll give you this money, but we want you to be on with respect to what major ally of ours in that same region? Israel. Yeah, it's kind of like saying, okay, you two are fighting. We're going to give you both to stop fighting. We're going to give you money both to stop fighting. So it works out sometimes. I mean, it's an interesting thing. So here's the deal. The gist behind Kennedy's Alliance for Progress is to give money. Give American money to Latin American countries. Okay? We're going to give American money to Latin American countries. Now, in fact, the goal is, and in fact, over 10 years, $80 billion are going to be invested. Given by the United States, $80 billion over 10 years to Latin American countries. And you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. I could do a lot with $80 billion. Although over 10 years, that's what? Average of how much each year? $8 billion. And then how much is that going to be spread out to? A whole bunch of Latin American countries. Okay? It's actually going to turn out to be not that big of an economic impact. But, you know, it's money. Here's the thing, though. It's conditional. Okay? This is part of Kennedy's 10-year plan to awaken an American revolution. That's the quote. Awaken an American revolution. Well, that sounds sort of slogan-ish. I don't know, Ellie, do you think Kennedy wants to encourage democracy? Yes, write it down. So that's one of the things we want to have happen. We want to encourage democracy because some of those countries haven't really got democracy that much. Okay? Here's some other things that are not so political, but they're very positive. You ready? We want to encourage literacy among adults. That's good. Okay? We want to increase the wealth of those countries. And the goal is to increase by 2.5% per capita income. So that's a nice thing. So we want to help encourage those things. And sometimes it's like, we're going to give you this if you do this, because that's good. You should do it just like the United States of America. We want price stability. Write that down. Price stability. Okay? Good economic and social planning. Now, the next two are going to be kind of interesting. This is part of Kennedy's plan. And as we go forward and see that this plan is not going to be around forever and ever and ever and ever, you'll see one of the reasons why. One of the things that he wanted to encourage in Latin America was more equitable income distribution. I'll say that again. He wants the income among the people to be more equitable. In other words, he wanted the poor to be less poor and the very, very wealthy to be less very, very wealthy. Because if you look at Latin America, in some of those countries, you would have really difficult poverty situations. And Kennedy's like, that's not a good recipe for long-term stability. And there was one other thing, and Kennedy encouraged this, and we've seen these two words before, and they're very, very important words. Raise your hand if you can tell me. What are the two words? Kennedy was encouraging this in Latin American countries to take some of the resources that provide a lot of wealth for just a very few people and redistribute it. Land reform, write it down, land reform, which always gets people a little bit nervous, especially the major corporations that own a lot of land that's going to get redistributed. So anyway, those are things that Kennedy is calling for. This is a comprehensive plan for these countries to do that. All right? Now, initially, the only countries that could get this money were ones that had democracy. Right? Initially. But they have to overlook that in some of the other countries. It's sort of like, we'll give you some money if you promise to make steps toward democracy. So like if you have a dictatorship, if you promise over time maybe to move away from that dictatorship, we'll give you the money. I don't know. If you had a dictatorship, Tara, and you wanted money from the United States of America, would you promise that the dictatorship would eventually go away? It's like, sure, I'll do that. So here's some examples of some of the countries that did that. You ready? Write these down. You ready? Argentina. Okay, these are ones with like sort of temporary dictatorships, sort of. Dominican Republic. You're like, my gosh, this is a long list. Ecuador. Guatemala. Honduras. And Peru. So these are Latin American countries, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, who Kennedy is saying, okay, fine, we'll give you the money, even though you don't meet all the criteria right now because you're not full-fledged democracies, but keep working on that. Keep working on that. You just keep working on that. Okay, we'll give you encouragement. You know, come on, it's like it's sort of probationary money. Now, if this is a funding program, can the president just sort of like say, hey, I've got some money and I'm going to spend it on there? Who needs to also approve it? Congress, yeah, exactly. So Congress supports this as long as, you know, the president, and you basically have to have the president and Congress go along with this. All right. Now, what happened, Trenton, in 1963 that puts an end to Kennedy's official involvement in this program? Yeah, he killed. Yeah, November 1963. So, Trenton, who takes over in November 1963? You can look. It's just over your right shoulder. Kennedy's number 35. That dude, what's his name? Lyndon B. Johnson. Yeah, so Lyndon B. Johnson. What do you think? Is Lyndon B. Johnson going to continue this program, the Alliance for Progress? What? He's his vice president. He's going to be like, yeah, I'm president now. Forget all that Kennedy stuff. No, he continues it. But, write this down, he changes it a little bit. He doesn't even bother putting temporary suspensions on the dictatorship-like component. He basically is like, hey, if you're a friend of ours, you're on our side. It's like, put the Cold War glasses on. If you're with us, we're with you. If you're against us, then, you know, darn those Cubans and so forth. Okay? When Nixon came in, when did Nixon take the oath of office to become President of the United States of America? He was elected in 1968. So when did he take the oath of office? January 1969. When Nixon came in, he looked at this program and he's like, never mind. So it's over. The president doesn't continue supporting that. I mean, do you think that might happen? Some of the programs that President Trump was in favor of, that President Biden is going to, like, I'm not in favor of that anymore. I mean, did some of the programs that President Obama want cease to exist after President Trump comes in? Yeah, sure. I mean, some will continue, some will cease and desist. And that's what happens to the Alliance for Progress. It ends in 1969. Okay? What is the evaluation of what happened during that time period? The standard of living grew about 2.6, so that's not bad, but there's not much land reform. Good luck trying to get governments to hand over lots and lots of land to the poor people. And in fact, there were more dictatorships in Latin America by the end of the 1960s than there were at the beginning. Most people look at it as, I don't know, not completely a failure, but as in, I don't know, it didn't really meet all of its goals. It was a bit of a drop in the bucket. I mean, think of it this way. What could you do with $80 billion over 10 years? How much? You pay for your college loan. There you go. Woo! And maybe one other person's? Okay. How much, I mean, like, how much of the relief, how much is the relief, like the temporary relief, like in the COVID thing cost? And we're talking about like $1 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion, trillions, yeah. I mean, so, billions. And yeah, I mean, there's some big, big stuff. Okay? So, Alliance for Progress. Well, at least they got a postage stamp out of it. Okay? And this is one of the things that, of course, IB wanted to make sure that we looked at. Now, let's look at Nixon. Yes? There were some people that were already vaccinated yesterday. Monday was the first day that vaccines were administered around the country, and there were some people in Idaho that were administered, healthcare workers and so forth, are the first line in. Okay, and then principals, just kidding, no. I mean, I think the teachers and school support staff and so forth were lining up. In fact, I was just asking, like, have we heard anything from the Department of Education? At some point, hopefully they'll communicate, because otherwise you just get somebody showing up in Albertsons going, hey, can I get that vaccine? I'm a teacher. I tell them the truth. Yeah, anyway, so I think they'll probably need to come up with some kind of like logistical thing as they go into the various different stages and so forth, right? It depends on which vaccine you're talking about, but it sounds like even like the most resistant, strongest vaccines and so forth, you still need to keep them cool. Yeah. But I think there's like 2 that are out there and maybe a 3rd one coming on soon and maybe even a 4th one coming on soon, because there's all these different pharmaceutical companies that have been working on coming up with a vaccine, and they're all kind of like getting in there, like, so, woohoo, this is good. There's a lot of impetus to get this thing done. I mean, hello. Because y'all love wearing masks. Y'all love, like, doing Zoom. You just love that stuff. You're like, I hope they get this thing solved by the end of my senior year. I'd like to have a normal senior year. I don't know about that. Anyway, so, Nixon. Let's talk about Nixon, shall we? Nixon's policy, next bullet point. Nixon, covert. What is covert? Melody, what does covert mean? Yeah, very sneaky, very sneaky. Nixon has, and he's not the first president to have this, but Nixon has very much a covert thing going on when it comes to Latin American countries. What is first and foremost in Nixon's mind? What do you think? That those Latin American countries institute land reform? No. That they have more income redistribution and so forth? No. That they're on our side in the Cold War? Yes, yes, that they're on our side in the Cold War. We're actually going to develop this because this is going to be a good chunk of the video, the last CNN Cold War video that we're watching in this unit. Chile, write it down. Chile, I'll give you the basics for Chile. Here's Salvador Allende. Does Nixon like Salvador? Here, look at the picture. Salvador Allende is the democratically elected president of Chile. Is Nixon like Salvador Allende? No. This is like, which one do you recognize? It's like, you got 2 men here. Do you recognize one of them? Who do you recognize? Castro. If Castro is a friend to Salvador Allende, Rodrigo, does Nixon like him? No, can do. Would Nixon move toward the United States having policies to ultimately upend the democratically elected government of Allende? Yes, because Allende is like a left-leaning politician. Okay? Castro is like buddy-buddy with the Soviet Union, right? Major enemy during the Cold War. So, oh my gosh, we're going to have to deal with the details of this, but it's like all of a sudden, where did Allende go? He's gone. He was overthrown by his chief of army, General Augusto Pinochet. We supported the overthrow of the Allende government. Do we like him? And this isn't Nixon, but this is, do you guys remember who this is? This is like his top foreign policy guy, Nixon's top foreign policy guy. Do you remember that, guys? Because he was interviewed in the videos. Henry Kissinger, yep, so we like him. Yeah. Kissinger, yeah, so we'll develop a little bit more on the details as far as like the, what happened, what went down in Chile, and how Allende was killed. So then we'll get to Canada, Mexico, Brazil, wipe her down, and make sure you get to your next class on time. All right.